So I just finished the first 3 books in the Inheritance Game series, and boy oh boy do I have some thoughts. Let's talk about it. Before we get started though, the number one thing that I will say about this series is, dear Lord, it is rated for 12 years old and up, and that is freaking ridiculous. It is not appropriate for a 12-year-old in any way, shape, or form. And if your kid is less than I would have a hard time saying 17, they should not be reading this series. With that said though, I picked up this series because I had seen a bunch of people talking about it online and was like, oh, that sounds kind of interesting. So I read the first book and was like, I'm okay. I'll keep going. I'll try the second one. Read the second one and was like, bleh, I would probably not really keep going unless I was not already halfway through. And then started the third one and was like, well, the only reason I'm still going is because I want to make a video about this. So this is that video. I want to compare this book to The Count of Monte Cristo because there's a lot of similarities in the formats of these books and the plot points of these books and these ideas that these are books that are very intricately plotted with a lot of relationships going on, with a lot of twists and turns, cliffhangers and surprises and all this stuff, right? But one of those books, The Count of Monte Cristo, is one of the greatest novels ever written. And this book, I rated all 2 stars, and that was being generous. So why is that? How can you have 2 similar type books and one be incredible in a book I would recommend to everyone and one be one that I'm just like, I can't recommend it? The primary reason for this is that when you look at the Inheritance games as a whole, there is no character development. And what I mean is not that there isn't development in the characters throughout the story. What I mean is that the character of the characters does not ever get developed. They're no different, especially when you look at the main character. Her name is Avery. Who she was at the beginning of the book is essentially no different than who she is at the end of the book on a character level. Yes, there are external things that change and happen and whatever, but she's essentially exactly the same person. But as I was reading it, I wrote a note that was like, hey, Avery doesn't grow at all. She just comes in and realizes how amazing she already is. She's just amazing, and everyone else is just realizing it as the story goes along. And then I kid you not, 5 pages later, I read this exact quote where she says, Tobias Hawthorne's game hadn't made me extraordinary. It had shown me that I already was. Oh boy. So I want to talk about the difference between a book that can actually change your life versus a book that is just fluff. If the book does not have any character development, as in the character of the characters is developed, it's not a great book and it can't do anything for you. You can't pull anything out of it. The point of stories is to help you understand reality better. They show you something that's false in order to help you do better in the real. So the problem with the Inheritance games in any book where you don't have character development in the characters is that there's nothing for you to take back into your life and actually implement and actually learn from, because the only stuff that happens is just external stuff that will never happen to you, and so you don't learn anything from it. There's nothing for you to learn from it. No one is going to give you $42 billion. Whole nother problem with that choice of money and all the stuff. Just, so many problems. No one's going to ever do that. So there's nothing in this book that you can take to actually make you better. And that's the main difference between this book and, say, The Count of Monte Cristo, right? The Count of Monte Cristo, you're looking at a guy who starts out as this young and naive man who's kind of flaunting his success in some other people's faces and doesn't really know how to restrain himself and constrain himself, and he gets put into prison, and then he becomes as angry and then morose and then apathetic, and then he's just suicidal, and then he meets the Abbé and he starts to gain some hope again, and then he starts to learn, he starts to get better, and then that starts to turn into this desire for revenge, and then he goes out and he starts playing out this desire of revenge and playing God and bringing justice to everyone, being the judge, jury, and executioner of everything, and then starting to realize holy crap, I can't be the one doing that. I don't know enough and I'm not powerful enough. I'm not God. I'm messing stuff up unintentionally for people that I didn't mean to execute. And then having to go through this change and then realize okay, you know what? That's not who I want to be. I need to let God take control of that. And even if you set aside the Christianity of it and the God of it and the whatever, any story, there are stories that don't have all those overtones and undertones if that's not your thing. But if they don't have character development, they're not a good story. They're not serving the purpose of story. Because the purpose of story is to tell a story that isn't real, to help you live your story that is real better. It's not this thing of like, oh, like I hate all these and you shouldn't read any of this and whatever. But I did come away with this sadness of there's so many people that I have seen that have said that this is their favorite series ever. These are the best books they've ever read. That just breaks my heart. Like if this is the best series you have ever read, holy cow, you need to read some better books, because this series is nothing compared to something like The Count of Monte Cristo. It's nothing compared to something like Les Mis. It's nothing compared to something like Redeeming Love or The Wingfeather Saga or any of these other stories that actually feature character development and that actually help you live your own life better. This series is just fluff. It's just fun, whatever stuff. And that's not inherently bad, but if that is your highest standard of like what you think books can be, I want to help you raise your standards, because there's so much more that you could be experiencing in the books that you read. So if you haven't read this series yet, honestly, I wouldn't recommend it. There's a bajillion other things that you can read that are so much better than this. But if you have read it and it is one of your favorite series of all time, I would challenge you to pick up any of those series that I just mentioned and read some of those and tell me how you think they compare to this series. And if you want some more recommendations, I'm going to link my best of 2022 books here. These are books that I read last year that I would recommend to anybody and that I think are books that will drastically improve your life if you read them, as well as be entertaining and just enjoyable reads. So check that video out next, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.